Okay, I'd like to open the meeting. I'll call this meeting of the New York State Financial Control Board to order. I am Bob Megna, State Budget Director, and the Governor has designated me to chair today's meeting. I'd like to welcome the designated observers to the board. The Financial Emergency Act authorizes certain elected officials to designate observers to attend the meeting for them. They are not entitled to vote. We have those folks with us today, and I would also like to note the presence of the following people. Doreen Izera, Observer for Senate Majority Leader Dean Skelos. Mark Spilker, Observer for Senate Minority Leader James Sampson. Norman Davidowitz, Observer for Assembly Speaker Sheldon Silver. And Jay Lifton, Observer for Assembly Minority Leader Brian Kolb. Chris Columbia, Observer for City Council Minority Leader James Ado. And those folks are here today. To our first order of business, I'd like to entertain a motion to approve the minutes of the last annual board meeting, which was held on July 25th, 2011. These minutes were previously distributed for comment. Do I have a motion?
So moved.
Second?
Second.
All those in favor?
Aye.
Aye. The motion is approved. With that, we can jump directly to the review of the city's financial plan, and I'd like to call on the mayor to present the four-year financial plan for the city of New York.
Well, thank you, and good afternoon to everyone. Before I speak about the city budget and four-year financial plan, I wanted to thank the members of the Financial Control Board for their continued leadership and excellent work. New York City has made 180-degree turnarounds since back in 1975, when this board was formed to help draw the city back from the brink of fiscal ruin. The keen insight and expert oversight offered by the board, I think, played a large role in that transformation, together with the guidance of Mayor Koch, as well as past governors Hugh Carey and Mario Cuomo. And we continue to appreciate your sober and even-handed analysis of the city's financial state and our plans moving forward. And we greatly appreciate the strong leadership and support for New York City that current Governor Andrew Cuomo has shown over the past 18 months. Today, I am here to discuss a city budget that I think responsibly and effectively balances the demands of the present with the needs of the future. As the board acknowledged in its report, New York City's economic growth continues, and it continues to outperform the nation, especially in job growth. The number of New Yorkers with private sector jobs is today at an all-time high. It now exceeds the record set back in 1969, and we expect this growth in private sector jobs to continue. We know that the city's job market, like the rest of the world's, is increasingly competitive and information-based, and that a high school diploma is the bare minimum required for most of these jobs. And we've worked to make sure New Yorkers have the skills needed to meet employers' needs by ensuring that students graduate high school ready for college and the professional world, and by expanding city-run employment and job readiness programs. Of course, some jobs go to people who work in the city but live outside it. The fact remains that New York City's population is at an all-time high. I think shows, however, that more families are being drawn to the city, confident that they will find opportunity here. And last week's employment numbers reflect that reality. The number of jobs in the city increased, and so did the number of job seekers, which is why the unemployment rate also increased. We want to produce enough jobs to see those job seekers find work, and I think we're making the investments that will help us do that. But let's be realistic. If you don't have a good education, your prospects are not great, and you're always going to struggle. And we will do everything that we can to make sure you get that education and that we bring jobs for all people with different sets of skills to this city. The board's report accurately, I think, highlights New York City's tourism industry as having played a key role in our ability to weather the economic downturn better than the rest of the country. New York City has always drawn tourists, but never before has the city developed a strategic long-term plan to attract more people from around the world, a plan that includes unprecedented marketing campaigns and major investments in our parks and cultural institutions, as well as upgrades to our transportation infrastructure. By doing that more and more, we have raised our tourism numbers to record-breaking heights, which has also been a boon to our hotel, restaurant, and entertainment industries. And throughout the economic downturn, we've been careful to avoid the mistakes of the 70s when essential services were slashed in an attempt to balance the city's books, sending our quality of life into a tailspin. Instead, we found new ways to cut crime and improve public safety. So far this year, we are on course to have the fewest number of murders in recorded history in New York City. However, sadly, yesterday's tragic loss of a 4-year-old child to gun violence reminds us that even a single death is one death too many. And under no circumstances can we be deterred in our efforts to get illegal guns off the streets and out of the hands of criminals. We've also seen a record low number of fire deaths in recent years thanks to the FDNY's record low fire response times and improved inspection and prevention measures. We've seen a record low number of traffic deaths thanks to our threefold approach to traffic safety, better engineering, better education, and better enforcement. And thanks to all this work, New York City is the safest big city in the nation. And last year, we wrapped up the safest decade in our recorded history. And I think that would have been unimaginable in the era when the Financial Control Board was founded. In addition, our comprehensive public health campaigns, including our efforts to combat smoking and obesity, are helping New Yorkers to live longer, healthier lives. In fact, New Yorkers now enjoy a life expectancy that is nearly 3 years longer than the average in America. At the same time, we've made major investments to expand economic opportunity and the opportunities that we think are needed to keep crime numbers low and city revenues high for the years to come. That includes the largest affordable housing program the nation has ever seen. Last week, we hit the 85% mark in our goal of building or preserving 165,000 units of affordable housing. That, just to put it in perspective, is enough housing for all of the people that live in Atlanta, Georgia. And this is just new and rehabbed affordable housing in the city. We're also hitting new milestones in our schools. In the end, the real solution to all of our social problems is better education. Last week, we announced the results of statewide test scores, which showed continued gains by city students in all grades, with our charter schools leading the way. Those gains are reflected in rising high school graduation rates as well, up from 46.5% in 2005 to 65.5% in 2012. We've gone from 46.5 to 65.5. That's a 41% increase in New York City compared to only a 7% increase in the rest of the state over the same period. The positive impact of these investments in New York families are sure to be felt when future boards gather here to discuss the city's fiscal outlook. This year's balanced budget also reflects our efforts to diversify our city's economy. Growing revenue from television and film production, as well as our expanding tech and biosciences sectors, have helped offset the loss in tax revenue from the financial services sector we've absorbed in recent years. Tech jobs, for example, have grown by 30% over the past 5 years, and we're making investments to keep that number moving upward in the future, including our Applied Science Initiative, which is resulting in major new investments by several of the world's leading universities. This emphasis on economic diversity, I think, positions our city to weather future downturns more strongly than ever before. Last month, I joined City Council Speaker Christine Quinn to announce a balanced on-time budget for fiscal year 2013. It provides essential services without raising taxes on New Yorkers. It increases city support for priorities we share with the council. For example, the number of classroom teachers will increase in the next school year. City support for public libraries and cultural institutions will also remain essentially the same. Our budget reflects nearly $6 billion, you should know, in savings generated through 11 rounds of deficit closing actions taken by city agencies since 2007, including $1 billion in savings enacted just since last November. And combined with the remainder of the surplus we wisely saved during the last economic boom, those savings are what permit us to preserve core city services without raising city taxes. They also permit us to meet the increased demand for social safety net programs. and we're also using $1 billion from the Retiree Health Benefit Trust Fund that we began setting aside before the downturn in exactly the manner it was intended to be used, to cover the cost of retirees' health benefits. Now, the budget also includes revenue from the sale of 2,000 taxi medallions authorized by the state. This measure is part of a taxi expansion which will do more than raise dollars for the city. It will also bring legal taxi service to the nearly 7 million New Yorkers who live outside of Lower Manhattan. And I want to thank Governor Cuomo for standing with us in our efforts to bring legal taxi service to all New Yorkers. As you know, the sale of the yellow taxi medallions has been delayed by lawsuits challenging the state legislature's action and by those who, for their own financial reasons, want to prevent most New Yorkers from enjoying a service that they rightfully deserve. We will not stand by where people, for their own selfish reasons, try to deny a service to 7 million New Yorkers. You can be confident in that, and we are confident that the city will prevail in court and with ample time to enact our responsible plan for beginning selling these medallions over 3 years. Now, there's still much hard work to come. Our budget projects a gap of $2.5 billion in fiscal 2014, which we're already working to eliminate. And by continuing sluggishness of the continuing sluggishness of the national and international economies, we think means fiscal stresses that will continue to challenge our city in the foreseeable future. Nobody should think that it's a walk in the park or a piece of cake or whatever expression you want to use, but we have, for the last 10 years, come here and reported that we have understood the issues, we have faced the issues squarely, honestly, and openly, and we've gotten us through to this point, a point that literally 10 years ago nobody could have predicted. And I'm confident that working with Speaker Quinn and the City Council, we will continue to deliver the city and keep the city in excellent fiscal shape while delivering the historic levels of service New Yorkers rightfully have come to expect. And thanks to Governor Cuomo's strong leadership, action has finally been taken to address the skyrocketing costs of public pensions. The broad, comprehensive legislation the governor spearheaded this year with support from leaders across the state will save the city $21 billion over the next 30 years. That is $21 billion of investments that will help attract new residents and businesses, keep streets safe and schools strong, and make our city greener and more sustainable for future generations. Or that's $31 billion or $21 billion in fewer taxes that we have to levy, which is also will be an incentive to get people to come here. And I think it also conveys the message that the governments of New York City and state are willing to tackle the most difficult long-term financial challenges, and that's going to continue to inspire further private sector confidence, investment, and job creation. I want to thank everybody, and I look forward to hearing the comments of others.
Thank you, Mayor. And with that, I'll turn it over to Controller DiNapoli for any comments he might have.
Thank you, Bob. Thank you, Mayor Bloomberg, for your report. I'm joined by our State Deputy Controller for New York City, Ken Bleiweiss. We've distributed to members of the board our review of the financial plan for the city, and I'd like to make a few observations regarding the city's economy and its fiscal condition. The city's economy is continuing its recovery from the worst recession in decades, but it remains vulnerable. The national economy, as we all know, has been recovering very slowly. Latest figures show that economic growth in New York State was much weaker in 2011 than in 2010. New York State's ability to provide financial assistance at the levels anticipated in the city's financial plan could be impacted by the pace of the economic recovery. The European sovereign debt crisis, which has spawned austerity programs in Europe and has slowed economic growth in China, also remains a concern. Many economists believe that the combination of higher federal taxes and spending cuts, which are scheduled to take effect in January 2013, could bring about a severe fiscal shock that could send the national economy into a new recession. In coming months, as the deadline approaches, it will become clearer how such changes, if they come to pass, could affect New York City. Although private sector employment in the city now exceeds the pre-recession peak, many of the jobs added during the recovery have been in low-paying industries. As a result, personal income tax collections are not expected to reach their pre-recession level until fiscal year 2015. In addition, the city's unemployment rate has returned to its recessionary peak of 10%, and is even higher among some segments of the labor force. While New York City's economy is more diversified than it was during the 1990s, the city is still heavily dependent on the securities industry. The securities industry got off to a strong start in 2012, but profitability has been volatile in recent years, and a single quarter's results may not be indicative of the outcome for the entire year. The recent rating downgrade by Moody's of 15 of the world's largest banks and securities firms reflects the challenges the financial services industry continues to face. As the city's economy has improved, so has its finances. 1 year ago, New York City projected a budget gap of $4.6 billion for fiscal year 2013, and out-year gaps that reached $4.9 billion. Since then, the city has successfully closed this year's budget gap and has narrowed the fiscal year 2014 budget gap to $2.5 billion without raising taxes or cutting basic services. Most of the improvement, however, has not come from higher revenue forecasts, but from reserves and other non-recurring resources. This year's budget includes more than $4 billion in non-recurring resources, which will not advance structural budget balance. In fact, the city's plan to deplete the Retiree Health Benefits Trust by fiscal year 2014 is a step back. While the city has spread out over 3 years the proceeds anticipated from the sale of taxi medallions, it has also increased the amount it expects to receive from $1 billion to $1.5 billion. As a result, the sale, which is the subject of ongoing litigation, remains the largest budget risk in the current fiscal year at $635 million. The city also has not yet reached new labor agreements with the unions that represent city workers. Most of the agreements expired in 2009 and 2010. Another area of concern remains the growth in so-called non-discretionary costs. While pension contributions are projected to level off, health insurance and debt service costs are expected to continue to grow at relatively rapid rates. For example, debt service is projected to grow from $5.1 billion in fiscal year 2012 to $7.3 billion by fiscal year 2016, an increase of more than 40%. In conclusion, even though the city still faces challenges on a number of different fronts, the fiscal year 2013 budget is balanced, and the city has made substantial progress over the past year in narrowing the out-year budget gaps. In closing, I offer my congratulations to Mayor Bloomberg, the City Council, City Controller John Liu, on a job well done.
Thank you, Comptroller. With that, City Controller Liu.
Thank you very much, Bob. I'm joined by Deputy Controller Simcha Felder,